On May 23, 1993, wax, or the discovery of television among the bees, entered the internet, projected by a cable into a wall. Inside that internet, there are no movies there. And so wax, waiting until the last frame enters the wall, then begins the first movie on the internet, to continue forever, for that is how the first movie on the internet begins, at the first frame after the last frame. A true story, and this is that movie, and in reverse. And so, we begin.
As you are aware, the internet is a DVD on a coffee cup. I could show you how that happens, how the handle of the coffee cup becomes the hole in the center of the DVD. How the interior of the coffee cup disappears into the surface of a flat disc as I spin. I am the first movie on the internet. I am inside a DVD on a coffee cup. I could show you how that happens. How the movie appears between two frames, between the front and the back of the DVD disc. I am the first frame after the last frame. I am the movie in the DVD on the coffee cup. I am wax, or the discovery of television among the bees. I am 999 years, 364 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 48 seconds long. And then it was dark, until dawn.
Space and time opened like an elevator to reveal a planet that had vanished, leaving its weather behind. Space and time opened like an elevator to reveal a planet that had vanished, leaving its weather behind. Space and time opened like an elevator to reveal a planet that had vanished, leaving its weather behind. Space and time opened like an elevator to reveal a planet that had vanished, leaving its weather behind.
Particular destinies, leaving long fading paths behind them, circle around a tube's circumference on a voyage of discovery. The tube, which will take you either up or down in dimensionless space, opens its potential doors to show that what's inside might be the same as what's outside, i.e. that perhaps this tube view is neither surface nor volume, just an after-death narrative element. In VTV view, many newly patterned triangles implode to become a centralized shape. They slightly bounce and float in darkness, showing the separation between their facets. This is the control panel of an elevator to hell, a destination chosen voluntarily. The analog, interior view of a beach surface, a spherical space. We see cloud blobs floating in front of us, a surface weather surrounding local voids. An electric telescope will be used to project this weather map flat onto the volumetric void, so that the narrator can look for and find the eye of God somewhere, out among the projected rain nebulae.
Here was the electric telescope, an astronomical instrument of planetary size. Here was the electric telescope, an astronomical instrument of planetary size. Here was the electric telescope, an astronomical instrument of planetary size. Here was the electric telescope, an astronomical instrument of planetary size.
No longer concerned with the weather of a missing planet, some void master twirls the spherical planet of missing weather into a tube shape, which shows how it is possible to ignore logical topo transforms and gain useful objects here in n space, among the society of the dead. Interior or perhaps just auto-subjective view of the tube, as seen by end users. We seem to be inside it, but are always outside it.
I looked in one end of the tube, and then the other, and started to search for the missing planet. I looked in one end of the tube, and then the other, and started to search for the missing planet. I looked in one end of the tube, and then the other, and started to search for the missing planet. I looked in one end of the tube, and then the other, and started to search for the missing planet.
View down the long foreshortened tube, which pulls away from the searching eye, changing its perspective variables to show itself as a shorter shape rotating in front of us. We get a momentary glance through this gizmo, before it softly twirls around in an attempt to present us with a view through the other end. The round edge of the telescope will, without any contradiction at all, connect to the square frame of the screen. The map of the universe is built onto the inner surface of this telescope thing. Just by staring down it, ignoring the dark at the other end, we are able to see every place, without straining our eyes. The void map inside the telescope flattens out onto the screen in front of us, spinning itself so that we can choose a random star from all possible selections available.
I discovered the planet of television 4 hours after my death. I discovered the planet of television 4 hours after my death. discovered the planet of television 4 hours after my death. Discovered the planet of television 4 hours after my death.
We're ready to travel and jump down the tube. Floating, we head towards a single blurred dot, visible out there ahead of us. Tiny iris in an infinite eye. Let's pass through to find the optic nerve that makes this dark sensitive and seeing. Just when the little moon we want to visit seems to have gotten close enough to devour, we discover that we have passed through the picture plane to emerge in an open space, perhaps UN territory, where there is a distant sun and many small floating planets, half lit in the rotating dark.
I went down the other end of the tube. I went down the other end of the tube. I went down the other end of the tube. Down the other end of the tube.
The floating space we've been staring at wipes away as the electric telescope decides once again to reverse itself, so that we can see a different view of the anti-universe. There are ratcheting mechanisms at work, in places invisible to us, making these motions smooth and the illusion true, which is a good reason why we're so patient, having been fooled into thinking that we are actually looking for something.
This brought me just outside the planet. Inside, the television was at work. This brought me just outside the planet. Inside, the television was at work. This brought me just outside the planet. Inside, the television was at work. This brought me just outside the planet. Inside, the television was at work.
This is the third time we've seen this green planet, algae-covered living empty-centered place. As we will now discover, the orb seems to have great burn zones on its surface. The greenness may not be organic, but just a simpler friendliness imitating life to attract us. There are more layers to this damaged onion. Yet another green stink disappears, giving the impression that perhaps there are more layers than space in this thing. Perhaps it is this potential infinity which gives it a look of such terrible damage. Hopefully, however, each embedded sphere is a closer approximation of what must be at the very center, and peeling away the pieces takes us closer the necessary end at its middle. Probably a chair in there. Under the thin flame of our gaze, we see the surface of the missing planet dissolve away, strip-teasing to reveal a stripes on an inner surface, perhaps a secret shape of the cane language band seen on the processing tube back at the exit from the pulsating place. Beneath this newly revealed surface, we can see a bifocal rotating object projecting some sort of vision on the sphere interior, following the path of the inner Earth's striped bands. As the entire exterior surface vanishes, the rotator pauses, then tilts down to the next band level, a moment of stop in the middle of smooth motion, reminding us of the Maltese cross at the center of every motion picture machine.
I went closer to investigate this marvel. I went closer to investigate this marvel. I went closer to investigate this marvel. I went closer to investigate this marvel.
Out of the very center of the planet coin appears a sudden smaller planet which dives towards us at our eyes. We move in for a closer view of the planet's tracked interior. The TV mechanism dissolves in mid-rotation. Its central axis is embedded in a sun, which points cones of extromissive sight out to the interior surface of the spackled sphere. Somehow, one gets the impression that there is some sort of processing going on here, maybe compaction of the planet's sphere from the inside out. The circular ends of the sight cones scan the dark and light bands of the surface, one cone to a color. These are tracks of attention laid down long ago by this pacing prisoner sun, once swallowed, and now forced to keep exact time during the infinity of its confinement. As partner in this punishment, a smaller counterweight sun, hanging behind the central sun, perhaps acting as a flywheel or other sort of energy source. This little secondary sun emits a single cone, which always stares at the back of the central sun's head. There are also many small objects floating in this central space, probably emitted by these secondary cones. We can imagine that this what the lit interior of a running vacuum cleaner must look like to a bug.
It was the closest I would ever get to the eye of God. It was the closest I would ever get to the eye of God. It was the closest I would ever get to the eye of God. It was the closest I would ever get to the eye of God.
The mechanical scanner, hearing an interior whistle telling it that the time has come to tilt, bends over on its own axis to take its two white eyes down to the next parallel pair of scan lines. The planet acts like tape, and the twin eyes as the rotating heads of a video deck. The TV rotates by itself in the dark, without reference to the background planet. It can hear the weather outside the dark, but prefers not to see it at this moment. This momentary dislocation is necessary for the TV to pass on to another of its many alternate personality shapes. Which one? We will learn in a moment. We are standing at the side of the crinkled yellow sun, whose surface is slowly fragmenting into sharp angles. The white cone is staring off-screen at the back of the other sun's head. Cicada shells crack in the dark all around, waiting for lost bodies to return to them so that they may retreat backwards through time to their egg-shaped beginning. If we tilt our head and attach eyes a bit to the right, we'll not only see the back cone, but also the central sun it is staring at. It is not sure if this constant stare only examines, or also motivates the inner sun. The inner sun has a fragmentation cycle, which operates in counterpoint to that of the outer central suns. Suddenly a beat hexagon appears in the center of the empty planet of television, showing on its bounded surface a mirrored image of the blue sky, where a multitude of small bees are traveling from place to place, all identical places, slightly twisted in relation to one another.
When the television turned its gaze on me, for a few moments I could see the world as the deity did, divided into different zones of transmission. When the television turned its gaze on me, for a few moments I could see the world as the deity did, divided into different zones of transmission. When the television turned its gaze on me, for a few moments I could see the world as the deity did, divided into different zones of transmission. When the television turned its gaze on me, for a few moments I could see the world as the deity did, divided into different zones of transmission.
We are standing above the total rotating mechanism inside the planet of television. We slowly approach the central sun, hoping that we can escape. pass through the smooth countersun that waits down the spinning end of the inner Earth TV, and wait as its weight swings towards us. We want the frame to be covered, so that we can look down it again, and perhaps return to the electric telescope. We didn't like that place so much at the time, but now we miss it. Spread out on the table in front of us is a flat projection of the inner Earth's surface. All the lost continents are there, in silt form, with everything they carried with them as they sank, carefully preserved, waiting the day an unhappy child with shovel discovers them by accident between lunch and nap, out in the backyard or by the side of the road. Solemnly, the surface of the inner planet slows, so that we can appreciate and perhaps even memorize the various shapes it shows to us. Can you recognize the place where you used to live?
That was where I had to go. That was where I had to go. That was where I had to go. That was where I had to go.
The swinging counter soon twists one more time to cover us with its cone, so that our dunce heads can spend more time in the electric telescope simulator. A tubular projection of the electric planet's inner surface. The purpose of this shape is to expel the void, but a visible seam running along the bottom of the rotating cone, connecting what should be discontinuous edges, offers a clue that the void has actually taken shape as the textured planet surface. If that's true, there's no escape from here.
My escort was still with me. Together, we traveled into the television and burst through to the past, where my future was about to be decided. My escort was still with me. Together, we traveled into the television and burst through to the past, where my future was about to be decided. My escort was still with me. Together, we traveled into the television and burst through to the past, where my future was about to be decided. My escort was still with me. Together, We traveled into the television and burst through to the past, where my future was about to be decided.
That uninterruptible X mechanism continues its cuckoo clock journey through identical space in different time. The dual-headed, multiple-use skullbird, on vacation, or on the lam, follows closely behind the X shape, suggesting that it may just be a different shape of the X. Screw up your four-dimensional eyes in this place, and things shiver into different form, just like that, and then go back before you even have the time to register what happened. For the last time, or the first time, who knows? The counterweight cone swings towards our vulnerable faces, to cover them and make sure that, by forcing us to watch whatever is inside, we'll get to happiness, as we shall sooner or later see in this story. Underneath everything, at the very center of the planet of TV, there is just another one of those little flat-beat hexagons, which at this moment is showing helicopters traveling from planet to planet along its faceted anti-surfaces. The travel tube, under our stare and the concentrated importance of this small moment, raises itself from black and white to a too many colorfulness. This color signal is an escape hatch from this place. Launching ourselves off sad and twisted hind legs, we jump to the void, and travel out among the lost elongated color pixels, which explode as we pass in order to make transport possible. Up ahead is the long gray and vague line of a landscape, a place beyond all this, a sort of Hawaii for the vacationing dead, an oil-soaked beach. A church-like outline breaks the long horizon. Inside, frightened singers hang at the edge of their notes, paused in panic to hear that their lost place has been found, and soon there will be, once again, yet another member added to their congregation. At the top of the steeple there is an empty window. Usually there is someone up there, staring out across the gray and blurred lost landscape, hoping for something, for the appearance of colored horses, or the sudden growth of flowers, or something for dinner. But our appearance and caused him to duck. Imagine what it must be like there, clutching the floor, wondering if an earthquake is about to begin, wondering who you are, what time it is.
By the fall of 1917, James Hivemaker had begun to hate his brother-in-law Zoltan Abbasid. By the fall of 1917, James Hivemaker had begun to hate his brother-in-law Zoltan Abbasid. By the fall of 1917, James Hivemaker had begun to hate his brother-in-law Zoltan Abbasid. By the fall of 1917, James Hivemaker had begun to hate his brother-in-law Zoltan Abbasid.
We're in the black and white world now. Some fellow is taking the top off one of a tall group of hives probably filled with honey. The top levels of the hive that hold all that money-making liquor, as is planned in the design of the box. It is a sunny Sunday. Church is out. Most of the congregation is back at home with their family, except for the beekeeper here, who works day and night, chained to the site, by that leg outstretched behind him, a busy bee in giant form.
He had no specific reason other than a desire to be the sole owner of the Mesopotamian bees. He had no specific reason other than a desire to be the sole owner of the Mesopotamian bees. No specific reason other than a desire to be the sole owner of the Mesopotamian bees. No specific reason other than a desire to be the sole owner of the Mesopotamian bees.
A flowered frame, hung on a dark wall, holds the picture of a hand, which in turn holds a frame-matching square-shaped comb covered with bees. The slotted box beneath holds other pages of this moving book. The comb is a square eye, facing us with badly shaped pupil, waiting for us to move so that it can jump and devour. When you get closer to the living frame, you can see how large the bees are, each the size of small mountains, moving in waves towards your ship, ready to overwhelm it with the suddenness of a tsunami visit. A warren of cells, some of them capped off to entomb forever their unborn captives, and others open and empty, waiting for the accidental entrance of unwary souls. When you lean over this part of the hive prison, you can see that some of the seemingly empty cells are actually filled with grubs, all in various stages of development. They constitute an alternate form of honey.
The bees were still multiplying. The bees were still multiplying. The bees were still multiplying. The bees were still multiplying.
A human hand at the hive stoop, near the entrance, or exit, to Bee World, attracts a vengeful bee, which roosts near the fingernail. It reads a small letter left in the dirt of the nail by the last bee.
Maker formed the idea that these bees were the dead of the future. Maker formed the idea that these bees were the dead of the future. Maker formed the idea that these bees were the dead of the future. Maker formed the idea that these bees were the dead of the future.
Doomed bees pass in and out of the entrance. They fan alarm smells into the air. The forest is on fire, and the flames are approaching. Hive maker stands by, watching.
Theory alone, he decided, could account for their awesome numbers. Theory alone, he decided, could account for their awesome numbers. Theory alone, he decided, could account for their awesome numbers. he decided, could account for their awesome numbers.
Along the ledge entrance, too many bees move in and out. Pieces flaked off the invisible central mass of biomass compacted behind those wood walls. Emerging from higher interior space, they are forced to use a flat slit door to enter into our lower world. A huge clump of bees surrounding what appears to be a human head held in the hand of someone wearing a tie. An older man talks to someone off-screen as swarming bees condense on his wooden hand. There are also bees all over his bowler hat. This gentleman is not wearing a protective suit. There is not need. He's made out of bees himself. Shaking his head over the hive, the older man releases that swarm of bees that originated in his skull, offering them a more amiable place to live in the small wood hive beneath him. They will easily leave his head. Nearby is another baseboard, also covered with bees, emitted by the same person. They are three-dimensional in air, both near and far in this picture.
Ellis Peraltam's machine had not progressed. Ellis Peraltam's machine had not progressed. Ellis Peraltam's machine had not progressed. Ellis Peraltam's machine had not progressed.
A hand broadcast on mechanical TV. UK hobbyists of the narrow-band television club reconstruct Baird's designs, using perforated phonorecords as the scanning disc, and off-the-shelf photocells as the sensor. The only thing holding them up at present is that they have nothing to broadcast. This was also Ella's problem, which she solved by broadcasting nothing.
Technical limitations had prevented her from building a machine large enough to scan an entire mourner or receive a complete soul. Technical limitations had prevented her from building a machine large enough to scan an entire mourner or receive a complete soul. Technical limitations had prevented her from building a machine large enough to scan an entire mourner or receive a complete soul. Technical limitations had prevented her from building a machine large enough to scan an entire mourner or receive a complete soul.
An ancient hand reaches across ancient unreal space, perhaps on some TV where every pixel is a B ranked according to brightness. Ghost photos showing hands materializing near a vase that might have come from the Tower of Babel. Another vase from the Tower of Babel, or just another Trinity site franchise. Here's a pot from the tourist shot, pointed in the direction of a jawless skull. An ancient filling in that jaw is still receiving broadcasts from unlicensed ham operators sitting on spring chairs in darkened bungalows on the other side of the moon. No eyes to stare at you, late at night, here on this negative TV. Bone was the paper of the age where this skull book was written.
The night that I, Zoltan Abbasid, was murdered, I had decided to reveal the results of my experiments on the Mesopotamian bees to my family. The night that I, Zoltan Abbasid, was murdered, I had decided to reveal the results of my experiments on the Mesopotamian bees to my family. The night that I, Zoltan Abbasid, was murdered, I had decided to reveal the results of my experiments on the Mesopotamian bees to my family. The night that I, Zoltan Abbasid, was murdered, I had decided to reveal the results of my experiments on the Mesopotamian bees to my family.
A large group of mixed-sex hive workers, disassembling the meta-hive insulating tomb structures first seen in the first act. Zoltan Abbasid's experiment is over, and the tomb must be opened. The sawdust beneath a rising lid of the cave hive is scooped by a basket-wielding mine worker. Think of this as a type of skull surgery. The doctors take the lid off the brain, place it on the ground, and other assistants dip a basket into the brain pan to remove the loose insulating material. When the front of the superhive is opened, sawdust falls out onto the ground. The quad hives beneath are revealed, 4 central processors ready to think and calculate vengeance, according to ancient algorithms.
New variant of Atlas machine was running in the garden, pointed at the hives, creating images from the sounds of the bees. New variant of Atlas machine was running in the garden, pointed at the hives, creating images from the sounds of the bees. New variant of Atlas machine was running in the garden, pointed at the hives, creating images from the sounds of the bees. Variant of Atlas machine was running in the garden, pointed at the hives, creating images from the sounds of the bees.
The guest workers continue to unpack the lost hives. They are formally dressed, as if part of a festival. Sacrifices will start after lunch, unless there's something good on TV. An array of lenses for the sequential capture of movement, used during zoetrope authoring and for other commercial purposes. A practical image dissector, used painlessly on living ghosts. The wiggling, therefore alive, diagram of an IPCOW disc-based mechanical TV receiver. If repair manuals were transmitted over television, it is certain that many strange composite inventions would result, simply because it might be difficult to correctly reassemble objects according to such vague and fuzzy pictures. As each new machine that resulted from faulty reassemblage would require in turn its own manual, it would not be long before the etheric ecosystem was filled with millions of competing manual channels, each hoping that there was a machine still existing out there in the world which it could be matched to. That is the obvious hope. The less obvious hope, of course, is that someone would then badly use that new manual channel to accidentally make many more children machines, and so cause children channels. A power grid made partly of television repair rays spreading in an accelerating descent. The Madra-derived religious practice of Okiyom, in which a specially cupped hand, pointed at anything with proper thought, can emit healing rays, has been used by its practitioners for the repair of small appliances. This diagram is probably visible anecdote of one such incident.
This was the first time either I or my bees had been in front of the device. This was the first time either I or my bees had been in front of the device. This was the first time either I or my bees had been in front of the device. This was the first time either I or my bees had been in front of the device.
Ordinarily, this centrifuge is used to separate radioactive honey from the comb. For those who wish to use mechanical television to speak to the dead, the presence of radioactivity is sure sign that ancient sighs are out there, waiting to speak to you. In the context of Ella's laboratory, however, it must be guessed that this machine has been converted to act as a scanning device for a totally analog, sugar-based TV system. In a sugar-based TV system, many ordinary objects used for cake manufacture can be adapted image mixing and image synthesis. This is one such device, in active operation. A refrigerator-derived servo mechanism used for sync and flavor control and organic, edible, television.
Strange patterns began to form at the receiver. Strange patterns began to form at the receiver. Strange patterns began to form at the receiver. Strange patterns began to form at the receiver.
Out of the past, one of Ella's eyeball photocells stares acquisitively, waiting to capture some departing soul with the sharp snap of a glass-slivered eyelid. It speaks outwards using an oscillating inset. If machine could speak to us, they might have strange ideas of self-presentation. Four photocells, all the same and each different. Do they all see the same thing? Are they the eyes of something distant? If distant, do they see for many who are now far away, or do they all see the same thing at once, in the service of a single distant observer? In the world of the dead, superabundance has made point of view an ancient concept, something cherished by collectors, such as these photocells. The pure wobulation of a day on the beach, at the edge of the air, in one of many missing universes. Large vague bands of auto-banking oscillation elaborates into muscular striations, as if the void were actually just a place inside the chest of a skeleton trying to remember how one goes about picking up a bowling ball from the surface of Jupiter.